where conceptualism takes precedence over mental or internal um, justification and or public justification, where an argument internally makes sense and where it doesn't. Conceptualization off from an idea is becomes the forerunner in the race, in the philosophical race. This all is a preface to a little string that's been going on Logic Rolls the Dice. I think it's his most recent video regarding panpsychism, and he I felt that it was jokingly like it was funny that he wanted me to whiteboard a definition of neutral monism, right? And but by doing so, I would be kind of like disparagingly following into the process, right, of analytically, if you will, spatio-temporally, analytically, mentally, mentally trying to describe that which is neither mental nor physical. So I found it funny, that he would ask me to fall into one to describe that which almost makes the defense for neutral monism incomplete. And yet I do all this in sake argumentation for the tree of panpsychism, which seems to me like ultimately I feel like my evolution mentally, following an archangel trifecta of Middle Earth, heaven, and hell. This is don't listen to this. This is the poetics I'm throwing in between my argument. I told Logic I would make an attempt at conceptualizing this. So how do I best go about it? And I figure I best go about it by first making coffee. So that's done, and I'm going to start on this. But really, the preface is there's an idea of and I'm swiping this from Sam Coleman, a panequalityism argument, where he goes over the combination of mental elements. Kind of like Google actually getting an exact number of how many grains of sand there are on the planet, instead of just like an approximate, it's a Googleism, it's or whatever the word is, that's a number that's bigger than Google. Just so used to Google now. And then I thought of the panequalityism is to justify my preface's circumnavigation in saying that because something can be conceptualized, doesn't mean it's real, right? And how do you how would one diagnose or suspect that everything that's conceivable, intentional, has we're not able to sense it physically, meaning one of the main attributes is that you're using kind of like a mental diagnosis, a descriptory power to describe things that are not the case. But since I moved from a secular humanist into I guess a spiritualist, I had migrated through a hierarchical attempts, which process ontology does not service me. Not because it's not a good description. It's because it's not putting a blind spot over the subject as it speaks from the subject, right? It's like a monad trying to identify with a boundary limit with all other mental monads. Like, I'm a human, you're a human, so we have common faculty in that we're isomorphic in some sense. But mentally or conceptually thrusting forward, as in the arts, ideas to inflate and deflate and tonalize and background and shadow and move through and present a concept, an end product, if you will, that at first may remain in a multitudinous, as if one human like myself could speak for all the other humans, all the other grains of sand that ever came before, simply by being human, right? But then I realized my genetics have morphed. Maybe this old hominid they just found is lesser than, or different from, or greater than, or just otherly, but similar, not dissimilar. By the same constitution, that this kind of like the scientific method, the scientific method, kind of like applied to logical internal argumentation. There's something about wanting to be and being. How would Eric Orwell say this? Eric Orwell, as he mentioned to me before, that how did he put it? I don't want to look it up, but basically that I'm not that I personally, my modality of expression is not rationally. I'm not following a principle of rationality or something to that extent. It's because I'm moving more towards, like, not just a postmodern, not just a lowbrow art, but a mixing of themenetudes or of process ontologic histories together, such that movie plots are put together in a manner that yields a specific offspring, and then echoes back to the monad, right? How can I be certain? It's the problem of other people's minds in a way. Like, okay, I assume because of language and because of the physical touch and because of claims of normative trends that everybody else is a physical, non-dissimilar and isomorphic mirror of me. But I also know that I'm not my body, but that my body does sit within structures, pranic, place, positioning. My body echoes my social reflection of, it has a face, and I live in defacement. I still see my body. As a matter of fact, by breaking my feet, I make certain I'm watching my body downward, seeing my body do things. Anyway, I'm way off topic. So trying to get back on topic, right? Part of this is a slip, slide, zigzag through around shapedness of kind of a bounded blind's eye, right? Like like we all have a blind spot as part of our physiological ontology, right? So whether we recognize we have the blind spot or not, we know we can line it up, right? So if we line up our blind spots, right, we can how to put it? We can fall in love with the idea of heat or coolness, or as they relate maybe to color ideas. To get a cold yellow is to add green, right? But to get a warm yellow is to add red or orange. So apparently the red line, right, is a conceptual idea that's Abrahamic in tradition. So to get back to describing neutral monism, not to bore you, Logic Rolls the Dice or whoever else is watching, but the idea is this. Kind of like identifying that the soul may be placid, it may be cooled. You may have a balanced soul, right? Happy, buoyant on the surface, or you may have an underwater mermaid kind of groundedness. Now, panpsychism, right? And Peter Pan, right? Peter Pan is a pan, but they always dress him like a girl with legs, even though he's a goat man with a pixie called Tinkerbell in Disneyland, and a pixie that follows him. And so being a pan is also being of the natural world, which is being grounded, which is sensing one's place in the natural world. Now, in the natural world means you're not necessarily covered by structures and tents and cars or internets. You come from the land. You come from the wick. Pans are wicked. Hence, panpsychism compared to neutral monism is a more earthly flavoring of conceptual possibilities of living that are more hot in nature, because one can conceive hermeneutically what it might have been to be a bushman, right? But I do think more and more, the more we in modern day involve ourselves under the umbrellas of technology, and from cars to houses to coffee makers to tents and cars and the internet, that the identification process is actually going to become a much more difficult thing for even furthering generations, other than to read or to speculate, to conceive upon prior to, kind of like looking at cartouches, hieroglyphics, without the Rosetta Stone. If we never had the Rosetta Stone, we would have been left in like a sense of speculation about concepts, and probably wouldn't have been able to decipher what those objects most likely, even at the very dated time that the Rosetta Stone was made, must have meant that late in the language of whatever that civilization's symbolic attributes were, because different dynasties had different visual descriptions of different animalic mixed gods. Kind of like the Dromos or the Sphinx is an inversion of the dog in the first Body Snatchers movie, a dog with a human head, instead of like a cat. Well, you got the Sphinx, a lion, but then you get goat Sphinx or Dromos, right? Very peculiar. Anyway, but what I'm saying is there's different ages to different conceptual considerations. So to get back to neutral monism, where my defense is that the conceptualization leads beyond the mental. What makes, you know, the challenge of whiteboarding neutral monism, once again, is that you fall into the boundedness of even the lingual system that I'm using. I don't speak German. I don't speak Korean, not other than just the most pigeony Korean, the Migukmal, Hangukmal, that I can. Anyway, so the point is me Migukmal, me English speaker, me speak mono English with variance shows a boundedness to conceptual consideration from which even the idea of internal monism was not only delivered to me, but if my explanation made sense and was translated appropriately somehow across languages, that boundedness would function. There's an outward erasure of boundedness through other people's mental technologies. I think this is why the world's becoming perhaps more artsy, or maybe it's just meant for me, right? Maybe you guys are all just meant for me, right? You guys are all tidbits of my experience that I'm adding and interacting with and putting energy towards. And what I get out of it is not dissimilar to a painting in that I don't think that the painting process by default necessarily expresses anything more than what the mind bounds to the hand, or where the mind lets the hand do what it will do through like a separating one's mental consciousness from one's body activity, where one is watching one's body perform behaviors without willing it to do so. It's not to say one is not willing it. It's just that one lets it take its guide. Once again, it takes the reins. Body takes the reins. If there is even a sinewy, small micro hair connection between the body and the mind, my blind spot, my consideration has gone over it, where it senses to me as something separate. This would function as an involution, logically speaking, where the groove itself functions as a mitosis sort of division, right? Like we're splitting off the physical from the mental. Now, how does my body register there's something, as my body as physical, as material? How does my body register something and describe it? Meaning, how does my body as my locus, right, my central locus, as it interacts with the universe, how does the physicality sense, right, like a type of description of things that are beyond what the mental could also possibly describe, in order to justify neutral monism as I see it. And if I'm wrong, even fundamentally, about how I'm describing this, feel free to tell me. I don't think I am. But anyway, so where do I want to go in how to describe? And this painting came to mind with the question, right? So let's see if I can brighten the day a little bit. It's a use of dual boundedness, like not dual boundedness, like dual identification, body identification, happening at the same time, in order to segment off the bottom chest functions as a red chest below the blue.
Yeah, it's source fire, right? But it's still the same body, it's the same chest. And I even pun it by giving the top one 4 nipples here. And the idea about this particular painting is to show kind of like a how to put this and how to describe it, like the physicality of the heart, right, is like a yoke which is meeting a broken egg that's kind of like a re-encapsulating. It's like a maintenance of ego, even though the spirit is like birthing itself back into its egg form, yet it's free through its fiery expulsions. The geometric mental recognitions, and here this is what should be whiteboarded again, but I've whiteboarded in historic videos. Perhaps I should link this, right? Because I'm not certain what to say about that. I'm trying to suggest that the red functions as identification of the physical, right? Giving yoke to the heart, giving yoke to, where in this case the heart is now the eye. You've moved the center of one's being functions as the heart vision, the heart sight. It's a heart-centered view of things, and yet the heart has simultaneously been taken out, kind of like here it's yoked, and up here is its binary opposite in identification. Oddly enough, it's a pan. It's a half goat, half man. And for me to make a connection, not just etymologically, well, I shouldn't say etymologically to the word pan in philosophical terms, in the word pan, like Seder, that functions as a bonding, kind of a separating of isomorphism, a bonding of conceptualization, if there is no etymological history. Okay, so I'm off topic, but what I'm getting at is that a physical description, this painting functions to me as a physical, like my body yearning at the heart to explode and re-yoke back into historic dead wisdom, represented by the dead snake, caduceus, or the idea, the phraseology is, be as wise as a serpent and as innocent as a dove, or something like that, right? It's funny the traditions in which sayings come down. But anyway, this is both entering back into the egg back here, but this is a spiritual. This is the spiritual, right? It's the top part of the pyramid. It's where the eye is. Right? Everything down below the pyramid, this functions that you are a brick in the pyramid. You're not being spiritual, and these are my geometric codices, and the heart is out, the lotus is open, and when it's a 5-6 combination. I'm just throwing that out for cosmetologists, people that ruminate on number and color and system theory, right? So Platonic form is like a mirror of conceptual form that we logically all apparently, when we speak in numbers and can get through geometry, can sense certain logics in normative behavior, like, oh, these cars are moving this way and they're going on this side of the road, and these ones are moving this way. And so we understand the difference between arteries and veins, trafficking. And so we have different traffickings, but what I'm suggesting is that the identification of dual body systems, even from top to bottom, the spirit down, red blow, blue enlightened, purple, magenta, a burgundy. These are like combinatorial colors arising in different patternings, right? And these combinatorial patternings go from red to red or yellow over that with a contrast of brown, up into the blues, into the whites, into a purity here, a green eye, once again echoing the green of the snake, the green of the crown, right, and then back out to a color theory, right? So a color theory is a type of conceptualized thing, right? Color theory, you're theorizing about how colors might spiritually work, or how they might emotionally affect a body, or how they intellectually, you know, red is for fire and you know, fire hydrants and fire things and exits sometimes, or greens are for exits. You know, it's peculiar mentally. But now how could one extrude and extrapolate, right? Extrude and extrapolate from that, and without using the blind's eye argument, like I'm just going to rub my blind spot over this area in order to justify conceptualization over physical expression, material expression, right? So it functions that conceptualization itself does not necessarily not mentally breach boundaries. That's why some people of a more classical, locked-in mindset cannot hermeneutically or emotionally identify with certain art pieces. They're dissuaded from spending time thinking about such things. Anyway, so one functions as a creative process. One functions as this, but to get back from neutral monism to panpsychism, right? Panequalityism, panprotopsychism, the proto-elements, the combinatorial bounded elements that one is identifying with. I say you can identify with a breach of this boundedness of anything that one could conceive, and to make non-isomorphic the connection between the simplest mental description or measure and the most minute of physiological reactions, like a molecule, right? I want to say, although one can sense similarity there, I would dissuade one from requiring that one sense a necessity for similarity there. And I say that because I think what is more isomorphic is bounding with all grains of sand on the planet, or all monads, human monads, living monads, soulful monads, animated nomads, monads, sorry, some nomadic monads, some monads with mono. Anyway, and meaning all you other humans, more blithely, language sharers, right? And by suggesting what is more isomorphic than what I said previously, identifying the simplest mental description and concept in isomorphism, in comparison, in similarity to the smallest molecular physical field. I say it's the smallest complex, the most simple description mentally can function isomorphically to describe the grandest physical happenings in terms of what we understand about the cosmos, right? Or what an individual monad might experience about the cosmos. Because I sense, okay, sorry, off topic again. I sense that I function
hopefully as a breach, a barrier, kind of a wormhole between philosophy and I don't know how to put it, and arts, I guess. Philosophy and the arts. Anyway, I'll get back to that later. Blah, 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 blah. Where am I? 30 minutes. Sorry, dude, I haven't whiteboarded anything. I sketched something out before I did it too, but I'm busy trying to use my art as historic conceptualization that is unique to my monad to describe something like a neutral monism, a neutral monadic tendency. Right, and I guess the other picture, right, to extrude conceptually, right, to take logic frames. Okay, we have logic frames. Maybe I shouldn't call them logic frames, like Venn diagrams, right? And these Venn diagrams are attached to the head of this guy. All right, there's different three-dimensional Venn diagrams that are extruded three-dimensionally from the mental set in terms of, like, one does not always have to think in terms of binary. One can think in terms of yeah, logical Venn diagrams and all of their implied differences. I mean, how like in terms of God, I used it before. Like, yeah, an involution, see, now my logic vocabulary erased. I put it in the blind spot. Where in historic videos I was quite adept. Okay, so once again, I'm not trying to argue for the blind spot, right? I'm not trying to argue for change. What I'm arguing for is that there is a witnessing from whatever I identify as currently relative to my history of conceptualization that takes premise over distinctions, multitudes, and boundedness of consideration. And yet I'm not going to babble in tongues, and I'm not going to speak as if I can speak another language. So I recognize there is a horizon and periphery to my possible expressions, right? Which then once again puts a boundary, puts a limit, and so can this boundary and this limit be used geometrically to ascribe something that is not sensed by the body, and but is well, it is sensed by the body, and so and it's sensed by the mind. It's sensed by the body in that I hear sound, right? An awareness, like right now there's a plane that's far off in the distance, leaving a nice echo, right? In conjunction with the other happenings that are going into my life and the cycled assumptions about what it is I'm doing, the outline that I'm creating in my mind, the congruous forms of happenings, even down to the invitation to whiteboard neutral monism, is like a symbolic, geometric tangent or point in I guess you might say a larger fractal of involuting or a self-reductionism. you know, I don't know. Once again, it's like an archangel mythology, which is stemming down from, I think, strictly Abrahamic lines and not necessarily Egyptian lines or prehistoric considerations of what a god is, but or what spirituality is, or what it means to have like a monotheistic God, a complete singularity of hierarchy. So what I'm saying is because I witnessed what I think was a reality breach, and hence an ontological consideration breach. There was huge flux between descriptive possibility of oneself and knowing, like having my body sense kind of a non-refracted, infinite, shining connectedness, you know, a one-godness, an I am godness that demonstrated a panpsychism, in that nevertheless I'm still of this world, whether I've witnessed things otherworldly that no other, well, only one other person could claim they saw one of them, and her name's Carrie Susan Sherlock. And if you care to look her up, good luck, because she's got a new married name. But anyway, she's the only other person that could confirm that I had a shared experience, yet this draws me back to the singularity of one's being. As one tries to attempts to extrapolate from sights, sound, senses, occurrences, the acuteness of coincidental or chronological happenings in a meaningfully yet geometric and or emotional patterning. When they're not geometric, when they are geometric in form, it's the mentality of my being, my rational vestigial appendage of my younger man days reacts to this and senses geometric or a type of knowing in pattern recognition that something is being asked of or pointed out to me, depending on how I respond, and that these happenings by other individuals, they already have used their blind spot to either discredit the patterning as having any meaning, or they will not conceptualize, speculate, and bullshit about what that means. They will not seek outwardly to find mental patternings in the happenings that are around. They're not aware of it. They won't want to ascribe it because they've already been taught that a creak on the roof or a cat's meow or a baby crying or a plane flying overhead cannot be extruded mentally considerably with conceptualization, as being the most macro of physiological. Your body's sensing it, your mind is digesting it, yet it's of another invisible realm. Now, to say this realm exists is not dissimilar to saying Platonic forms exist, right? Out there, you know, or, you know, and it's not isomorphic to the grandmother brain cell theory, like, as soon as that cell pops in my brain, the memory of my grandma will go away when that neuron dies. You know, it's like, it's not, I don't know what to say about that. What I'm getting at is that the meaning for me of even being asked, if I may do this by LogicRollsTheDice, as I took it, how to spend this portion of my day at 11:11, is is like me feeling like I'm in kind of a hollow, ghostly way station, like the subway ghost in the movie Ghost, right? And in not that I'm caught there, but it's like a it's kind of like Neo was enlightened prior to meeting this guy, but if Neo got caught in the subway on kind of a re-emergence in his life's adventure, right, then he better get out of it. So I feel like the arc, which I identify archangely with at times, is simply a denial of puritanical ascension, heavenly virtues. It's finding kind of a displeasure in grace and wanting a mitosis or an involution, a piercing cavity of difference, to retain some semblance of rational wisdom. And why do I do it? It feels emotionally like I'm justifying for what would appear to be, perhaps, if you're into, you know, Abrahamic religious binaries or logical binaries as necessities of existence, then I would be saying I identify with diving to hell as an archangel, or just going infinitely to hell. And why? Because I run the red line. The red line is the hot line, right? And it's a violent line, apparently. But then I'm also a vibrationalist, where we set our vibes does not separate us from what our life looks like. We seem to vibrationally coordinate somehow with our presence, because we're not separate from our environment. We're all together. So a universe with many minds. It's weird, because at one point I did feel like my mind is but a connection with everybody else's. But I also was recently called a polluter. You're polluting this, which is funny because I shouldn't say I polluted. I responded to somebody whom I felt was polluting what's the comedian's name? Chris Rock video. By turning it into a social video about racism, instead of finding any, you know, visceral jocularity happening in the laugh department that would make you know, watching a Chris Rock video and reading the comments, you know, like congratulatory. And so here I am violating an actualize.org video. I shouldn't say violating, but throwing a counterintuitive reconsideration in something where I'm certain his intent was best, but I felt historically at prey to somebody who spoke like that, so I was simply being defensive. And so now if I say I am like in a type of purgatory or descent into hell, or in an unknown that I cannot actually know again until I once again re-emerge in kind of like a self-defined, I've got a lot of time on my hand, I already ascended, and now I want to examine it by re-descending and re-ascending into purity, but now I'm caught in this subway, right? And yet I'm describing all this mentally, right, verbally, right? But I'm trying to use image statements as opposed to rationally applied. I don't know quite how to put it. Not Plowman's reading, but our left to right reading connected structure. And that's why House of Leaves, the book, is such a good coupling with, I think, Derrida's of grammatology in terms of and other philosophers. I'm certain you'd love House of Leaves, but it's a tumultuous guiding through, you know, a dark spiritual landscape. When there were Minotaur, I don't know, when the Minotaur or Pan's Labyrinth or stuff like that were popular movies, it seemed to be and match its zenith, House of Leaves. At the same time, those types of adventure, spiritual death horrors were in case. Anyway, I guess just for the sake of wrapping up, because I got to get out of here. So I'm not certain I've said anything other than what the preface said of kind of a conceptual override, taking like the. Okay, I'll show you two things, and then I'll hang up, unless I feel like babbling more. In which case, thank you all for entering my little being for this moment. Okay, so this was the little sketch I did immediately, right? Which is it's the top and the bottom one. The bottom one shows tangents. It shows connections. It shows vulva. It shows an involution. It has a point, but the point is internally. It's like a bounded map that is to describe more of how I would approach, without puncture, a notion that my greatest vision of how things are connected, each molecule in this grand play of ours are connected, even conceptually, to spend the physical interplay of neurons out in this manner reflects something physically into the universe. Is I don't know. It's an exuding, an infinite outward shooting of light, until, like negative space draws its gravity in, until the individual is forgot, or the moment is put up as historic, maybe fractal minutia, not particularly important to whatever the current normative mindset is of any future generation. Or perhaps that's all the internet is for, is to slam us all together in an apparently ongoing, infinite, bounded and unboundedness, bounded by sphere, by planet, kind of, but maybe not, and considerations that Platonic forms are reachable, they're describable. Are they real? I mean, even the idea of neutral monism is to describe that which is not, which means that it is, in my mind, the eye of the conceptual lead, right? And it doesn't function as an ontological dichotomy. This is different than that description. I mean, it's apparently none of the dichotomies. To describe neutral monism is to make dichotomous, trichotomous, a description of the not, meaning a defense of the spirit of one's being relative to the universe, whether one identifies it within later a binary trajectoral boundedness, or in a multiplicity of just, I don't know, as Carla would say, yeah, the process, or maybe it was me that said the process ontology as a redescription, because it's almost like, because this technology, even our language processes, already requires a inclusion of one's sense of identity within the logical rational, where conceptually, we become habituated to it, and then it becomes a part of our normal
philosophical flavor, but this is also like, it's like philosophy on the internet is like an attempt, unfortunately, and maybe previously in Ivory Towers, to satisfy the logical positivist scientific accordances, meaning that we're not going to sacrifice technology to run off into a panpsychist field and live at Burning Man forever and ever and ever, amen. Even they function in a form of modern irony with their attempt, but hence they're more pan-proto-psychists. But I don't know. Oh, and I guess the last thing I was going to show you was this butane lighter. Right, here is both the mental and the physical describing something outwardly, right, that is real. Meaning it's an expression of the soul is on fire because it is alive. Hence there is heat. Hence there is effect of heat. That effect of that heat mentally, geometrically falls into Platonic forms of nonness. And then physiologically, I sensed this light, all metaphor, all digestion, all of my body's interaction with its environment and in terms of its inclusiveness and exclusivity. Is, I don't have a conjoined twin unless I have one living in my left nutsack. Anyway, and so yeah, I'm not certain, absolutely certain, what to conclude that I learned from this lesson. But generally, I like to learn from my own videos. And, oh, yeah, balance and buoyancy with the currents. Don't rock the boat. But yeah, I was trying to get to a very definitive, conclusive end to this video, but I don't think it's going to happen. Therefore, it's going to be just like my own history of non-conclusive endingness, and hence I function as but a particle in the combination of LogicRollsTheDice's bounded combination field universe, and a oneness with everything does seemingly require the lack of allowing one's mind to require of itself a rational, logical, or a descriptive neutral monism, a descriptive process. That's what made him asking me to do this ironic and funny. Yet, I said there is a breach in ontology. LogicRollsTheDice. There is a breach in whatever your even process ontology does not. Well, I shouldn't say does not scientifically, rationally describe the other phenomena that I've witnessed and shared in that one occasion that I was mentioning. It does not disclude that. And yet process ontology, if made poetic instead of but rational, would say, oh yeah, these are alien entities that apparently I imagine, not only imagine, abound in multitudes of difference, even though I've only seen, what, two that aren't at all remarkably remoted from this physical possibility as I have ever known it, my understanding. So either it's like, it's not future technology that's gone back in time, or maybe it is. It allows me an explosion of conceptual considerations that move me towards higher intelligence, otherly intelligence, aliens, gods, plural, gods, singular. And so I guess the poetic process ontology would just say, oh yeah, these otherly world entities showed up in this reality, and not, I wouldn't say as a subset of, but as kind of a collapsing of the dymatism of what we would call processor change into a static paper dragon from which one can cut their reality from, provided they're willing to suffer the that process of making nowness the verbus of whatever this claim towards change is, and yet not. Basically, it's a don't hold tight to the idea of change. Witness the meaning of what's changing, and then put yourself in connection with that. And hopefully, you don't become all afraid of the public.